Welcome to the Entrepreneur Stories podcast. Jonathan Herps is your host. He is a strategic advisor, coach, and mentor to entrepreneurial founders, business owners, and CEOs. In this podcast, he chats with entrepreneurs, founders, and CEOs of scaling companies. It centers around their entrepreneurial journey so far and their aspirations for their companies.
Hi, everybody. Welcome again to our podcast, episode number 102. And it's my great pleasure today to introduce Emma Weston, who's CEO and co-founder of AgriDigital. Hi, Emma.
Hi, Jonathan.
Thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, really happy to be here.
So why don't we just start with a little bit of your journey today and also what AgriDigital actually does, please.
Yeah, so the really potted history is I actually started off life as a lawyer and very quickly realised I wasn't cut out for partner track, but didn't quite know what to do. So I took a job at an in-house counsel role at the Australian Wheat Board, and that was really my introduction to agriculture and the grains industry, and that's really where I forged my career ever since. So without going into everything, because I'd love to get onto AgriDigital, there's been a few businesses that I've exited along the way, now working with AgriDigital, and AgriDigital's, I guess, really the culmination of years of expertise, not just mine, but also my co-founders, Bob McKay and Ben Reed. We've been working together as a team for probably almost 20 years now, or maybe 15 years, in some of those businesses I was mentioning earlier. And AgriDigital is very simply a digital grain inventory management platform. So it manages all aspects of the grain supply chain, from the harvested grain in the paddock all the way through to export and payment. And so if you're not involved in the grain supply chain, that probably seems pretty simple, but actually there are a lot of participants, a lot of intermediaries, a lot of traders, a lot of brokers, a lot of people who move grain, store grain, class grain, grade grain, treat grain. There's a lot that actually happens to just put bread or pasta on the table. And our platform has taken all of the various manual processes or previously manual processes, pieces of paper, millions and millions of pieces of paper, and built that out into one integrated set of workflows and digital inventory management platform.
Okay. But it's not only Australia, is it?
No, so we did take a kind of a cut down version of the product, which is really focused around the farmer group for expansion in North America, and so that's still something that we're really working on. Certainly, the big success and scaling so far has happened in Australia when we're really growing off the back of what we've done in Australia.
Okay, thank you. So, I mean, who would you describe as your core customer?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Look, I think it's, very simply, I could say it's the grain supply chain and anyone who participates in the grain supply chain. And at one level, that's true. But really, it is a growth-oriented participant in the grain supply chain. So it's someone who probably doesn't come from the ABCDs, as they're called, the Archer Daniels, Midland, Bunge, Cargill, Dreyfus, the very big multinational trading houses and commodity houses. But it's from the plethora of small to medium enterprise across the global grain supply chain who would come to AgriDigital in order to look at a way of digitizing their core operations as a storage operator, as a trader, as a broker, and to an extent as a farmer. That's something that's a bit newer for us.
Okay. So listen, we all come through the pandemic, and you've been operating for a while. What actions did you take that during the pandemic that has stuck with the business?
Yeah. I think we did a lot of experimentation, probably like everyone. So that sort of spirit of experimentation, I think, has stuck with the business. One of the things that we, like everybody else, was pretty much forced into was remote working. And that is something that we have decided to continue. Actually, after the core period of the pandemic and the lockdowns was over, we did trial hybrid. So that was in the office and remote. And we just found that for us, that didn't work as well. So we've gone to a fully remote set up. And that really means that everyone operates off an equitable playing field, in that when we dial into meetings, everyone's dialing in. If we decide to have an in-person event, it makes it all the more special. So that's certainly something that has stayed around post-COVID. I think the other one that I would think to is really laser focus. During that time of the pandemic, and it came on the back of, for us, it came on the back of droughts and floods and bushfires. And so, some pretty challenging times that we've had to navigate as a startup to scale up business in agriculture in Australia. We were in the beginning doing a lot of things and kind of trying to be all things to all people, I would say. And during, these challenging times, it became clear that really success was going to come from being laser focused and being really clear about the products that we were taking to market, what we could do and what we couldn't do, and being really transparent with our customers around that. So I'd say that's what has absolutely stayed with us. And that probably would have come about anyway, but certainly the COVID and the pandemic accelerated the need for that type of focus.
There's some great lessons in there from your answers. One of those about, if you're going to have a meeting and someone's doing it by Zoom, everybody should be on Zoom. And it's one of those things I coach my clients that, even if you are hybrid, if you're doing a Zoom meeting and someone's on Zoom, everybody should be on their own computer. Because it is so frustrating sitting there, watching a boardroom full of people, and you're an afterthought.
Yeah, I think no one intends for that to happen, but that is just the reality. You start to talk to the people that are in the room physically with you. And so you tend to miss some of those attendees who are dialing in, who obviously have, fantastic input to make, great ideas, contributions, critique, whatever it may be. That tends to either get missed or it gets curtailed in some way because the room becomes the dominating environment in which an exchange is happening.
Yeah, very much so. And, the other part of that is that one of the things I talk to my clients a lot about is equal talk time.
Yeah.
And, it doesn't matter how empathetic a team can be. Quite often, present company accepted, but it's the people from non-English speaking backgrounds originally, or women, who don't necessarily participate as much as we would like in a meeting. So when I'm coaching my clients, we literally round robin, and everybody has to speak, and everybody has to be given the opportunity of equal talk time. So that backs in really well to the point you made.
Yeah, I think so. I think everyone's got something to say, and part of the job of the facilitator, or taking your role seriously if you've convened a meeting, is, I think, inviting the right people to the meeting. And you don't have to have everyone there, but inviting those who do need to be there. And if you've really been thoughtful about who you've included in your meeting invite, then you want to hear from all of them.
Absolutely. So what does the future look like, and what challenges for you and the company do you see going forward?
Gosh, I do think it is going to be a bit of a challenging time, to be honest. I think we face some, in our industry, although we're tech, we are ag tech. It is agricultural, it is environmental, it is climate impacted. And so climate's a really obvious one that is, causing, I guess, it's speeding certain things up, like the cycle between a drought and a flood, I think, is getting shorter and shorter. And so, that means that we have to, our clients need to respond in their business model, and we need, that flows onto us in terms of the type of technology we provide. So certainly think that's in the future. I also think the geopolitics of, that situation we're facing is going to continue to be challenging for a while. Pardon me. For us, that means that, we have clients who, used to export or deal with the Ukraine. We have customers who deal in the Middle East. It's these are challenging times. So we need to kind of anticipate that from our customers' perspective. And then I think, just as a technology company, a lot of what that means is that uncertainty really does factor into the level of capital that is available for early stage, to scaling companies. and how risky or not, certain and how patient or not, some of those owners of capital are prepared to be. So, what that has meant for us, and we're in anticipating that, we've tried to start really thinking about our structure and about the economics of what we do to ensure that we have a sustainable model in place and that we can move to being self-funded, i.e. a successful business model that, I know it sounds crazy, but is actually profitable and doesn't depend upon external capital to be coming in at regular periods in order to prop the company up. But what that also means is that the capital that we get in, we need to be really clear about how we're using that for growth. And, I think it's just not enough to use that in day-to-day operations. So I think being really clear about what our growth strategy is, being very capital efficient in how we move forward, being alive to what the problems are going to be for our customers. That's what the future holds, at a kind of a macro level. For AgriDigital, we do really have a focus on being the dominant provider of digital inventory management software to the grains industry in Australia. So, we've set ourselves some 3-year targets of, wanting to get to that level of market share. Currently around about 25 to 30% of all grain grown in Australia goes through an AgriDigital product. We'd like to see that get to over 50%. The reality is, in order for us to do that, we have to not just continue to do what we're doing, but actually to collaborate with others. So collaboration is going to be a really big part of our future, not just forging ahead and being a sort of a standalone startup, who's innovative and bit of an upstart and can trade off that relationship that it has with its customers. We actually have to have relationships with those who are not our customers as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. Some of the points you made. It's one of my clients is actually an agricultural co-op, and right. Some of the issues they're dealing with, very similar to you, and climate related, significantly changing their clients' business and therefore their business as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that sort of what we're seeing in the ag industry is that leads to consolidation normally, and there's both challenges and opportunities, as a result of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what do you think has been your biggest learning since you've been a business owner?
Well, everyone told me from all the way through that it would take twice as long and cost twice as much. And of course, I thought we were different, but we weren't. So, I think that is, one of those truisms that, is mostly true most of the time to, most companies. Bearing that in mind, I think, that what we could have done better, as a business is to not have been so reliant on our founder group, after the initial couple of years of getting the business up and running. So I think it's taken us a little bit of time to start building up a layer of, capable senior management and executives in the business that can really start to propel the business forward in their own right. And the reality is that after a while, founders do not have all the answers. They don't have all of the ideas. They may have got the thing started, but, they don't necessarily have, the skills and capabilities to take the business forward into, its next phase of being an operational business versus an early starting, innovator in the space. So I think having been, if we could do our time again, I think we'd be a little bit more thoughtful around the way that the founders engaged. And I would definitely have hired more senior, capable, experienced staff earlier than what we did.
Yeah, it is the classic accelerator is who, not how, hiring the who and letting them get on with it. Yeah,
I mean, we just thought we could, we thought we were saving, but really it was costing.
Yeah, it's a very, very good lesson. So tell me, when you think of the word successful, who comes to mind and why?
Yeah, when I think about successful people, actually what comes to mind for me is happy and contented people. It's not necessarily a bank balance or an exit or, I don't know, a fast car, whatever it may be. I think about people who really have a good sense of themselves and are really happy in themselves and content in themselves. And so I think you can be really successful, through all walks of life, no matter, where you might think you sit, in a socioeconomic viewpoint. I wouldn't have said the same thing 20 or 30 years ago. I think, success to me really did have quite a monetary component to it, but it certainly doesn't anymore. And I think those sorts of people have really clear values. So to me, when I meet someone and I know what they stand for, and I see them act in accordance with those values, to me, they're the epitome of success.
It's really, this is one of my favourite questions.
It'd be great to hear what so many, I actually did a little bit of, looking around at some of the, and I've watched some of these, videos before. And so it is always interesting to hear what people say.
Yeah. And, it ranges from, the Elon Musk, Richard Branson type, there's one.
Yes.
Down to, some specific people, mum, dad, grandmother, sister, brother, and then, a bunch of the way you've just answered it. And it really, and I find it interesting because, I'm very privileged to be a 63-year-old father of 2 9-year-olds.
Oh, yeah. Amazing.
We came back from overseas and we brought 2 beautiful adopted babies home with us. And they have changed everything about my focus.
Yeah.
Number one, we moved to regional New South Wales to Barrel because mother-in-law and sister-in-law were here. So, the high-flying CEO suddenly became a company director and now 7 years ago, a business coach and a founder coach. And a lot of that is driven by, I want to drop the kids at school. I want to be here when they come home from school every day, wherever possible. Building those memories with my family is the priority in my life. And so it's really interesting, the different types of answers we get. And, I'm not going to say that you're old and certainly not to my aging status, but it's interesting as you go through stages in life how that stuff changes.
Oh, look, I think it certainly comes from having a family and, watching that family grow up and, and our family is a blended family. So that's required a lot of, investment and patience, and it's had its ups and downs. And so, one learns a lot, through that process. But look, as I said, I think I would have exited uni thinking, success was really, didn't everybody think this is what success is? And now I recognize that, my definition certainly isn't the same as everyone else's. But, you just see some people sometimes and they've got it, right? And it doesn't really matter what they've done in terms of their career, but, they've made life a success. And I think that it really is the most important thing.
I agree. Tell me, how old are your children?
So I've got 3 stepchildren and 1 biological child, if that's the right way of saying it.
That's right,
So the eldest is 35 and the youngest is 17.
Oh, okay. I never would have guessed that.
It's great.
There's a podcast that I love called How Other Dads Dad.
Oh, right. I haven't heard that one.
So it's Hamish Blake, who is the host of Lego Masters and things like that.
Yeah.
And he started interviewing his mates about how other dads dad. And 2 of them particularly, one with Rob Stitch. Rob was a McKinsey consultant, a McKinsey partner, became a comedian, produced The Castle, produced The Dish and all sorts of things. And the other one, Scott Cam, who is the host of The Block.
Yep.
Highly recommend every parent to listen to those 2. If not,
I bet it's not just for dads, right?
No, it's not. No, it's certainly not just for dads.
Yeah.
But like I listen to it in the car with the kids, and it's really, like it's some fabulous insights for, particularly for people like me with younger kids, but some of the insights for you with older children and how they manage those relationships. It's I might listen to it myself, but I might also pass it on to our eldest son, who
has a little girl who's turning 2 early next year. So he would be like right in the target market, I imagine.
Yeah, no, you should listen to it yourself, but definitely for him. It's one of those things that the lessons I've learned out of it. One of the things I took the kids and my wife to Uluru. And actually, we started this conversation. The reason this podcast came about was because I was on the beach in Fiji, and my son was saying, "Stop listening to Tim Ferriss' podcast, 2-hour long form." And while I was playing with him, it was like, idea, 25-minute short form.
Yes.
But I took my wife and children to Uluru for her birthday last November, and on the way back, I discovered the podcast. And one of the things I didn't get until then, was that children don't do views, as in Uluru, Cartagena, the Olgas, unbelievable. And when I asked them on the plane what was your favourite memory, they had 2. One was the buffet breakfast, and the other one was the Fijian staff singing "Happy Birthday to Mum."
Yeah, I think that's it's pretty consistent, and I think that's it's nice and grounding. That's I think one of the main things that I love about kids is how they kind of bring us right back.
Exactly right. But a lesson for you and your son. Rob Stitch would say that you only have 8 summers with your children. Up until 4, they're pretty much with you. After 12, they want to be with their mates. So for grandma and dad, you've got 8 summers to have lots and lots of fun with them before they grow up and become little adults.
Yeah, well, it certainly makes you think, doesn't it? I mean, as a parent who's been a parent and step parent for a long time, I can also add that our kids definitely, they boomeranged back. So they sort of came back at about 25 and found, just reconnected with us on a new level, on an adult level. And yeah, it's their adult lives have been a joy as much as their childhood was as well. So
there we go. So much for our business podcast.
I know, life podcast. Yeah, back to it.
I'm going to say, it's one of the things I love about this, because the conversations go everywhere. It's lots of fun. Where were we? Successful. Are you a reader? Do you listen to podcasts, or any that you'd recommend?
Yeah, so I'm pretty diverse, I think. I read. I tend to read physical books. I quite like holding a book. So there's something still about a book that I like. But I do listen to a lot of podcasts and read a lot of blogs as well. On the podcast side, what would I recommend? I think from a business perspective, I do like HBR IdeaCast. I just find it's, once again, relatively short format. Brings some of the best brains, right into your ears. So I think that's really good. It's just a good one to dip in and out of, not necessarily one to listen to all the time. In my area of business, in ag tech and in agribusiness generally, the best blog, hands down, is Shane Thomas's Upstream Ag. It's for anybody who is in that industry. I just think that's a must read, his Upstream Ag insights. He's fantastic, his analysis. So that's not for everyone, but if you happen to be in or related to my industry, that's definitely one. And from a book perspective, if anyone hasn't read Shoe Dog, I definitely was surprised how much I liked that book. And so it's about the founder of Nike, Phil Knight, and his story. And it's a pretty it's pretty rollicking read in some ways, but I think there's just a lot that not all of us are starting Nikes or working at Nikes, but there's something for everyone in it.
Yeah, and particularly how to get the amount of work and conscious effort, I suppose.
Just persistence. We all do have down days, of course, but the fundamental need for self-belief, it's fine for others to believe in you, but if you don't actually believe in yourself, you probably won't get there.
That's right. And a bit of imposter syndrome thrown in.
Well, we all have that, don't we? I've definitely suffered from that. Absolutely.
So I'll throw you a TEDx talk video to go back on. Go and listen to Mike Cannon-Brookes, his TEDx talk on imposter syndrome.
I will. I'll do that.
18 minutes is one of the best TEDx talks I've ever listened to. And given that he's absolutely relevant to us in Australia with what he does, his bit about he talks about being on Twitter late at night one night, and it was just after the South Australian electrical crisis when all the power poles got blown over.
Yeah.
And Elon Musk came up and said, I can fix that in 90 days. And Mike Cannon-Brookes came back and said, really? And Elon Musk said, yes. And one thing led to another. Cannon-Brookes said, by Twitter at 1 o'clock in the morning, I'll help you. He went to bed, woke up, and all of the press in Australia believed he was the renewable energy expert in Australia. And, he's talking about that imposter syndrome, in fact, all through his career, but it's a fabulous story that's so relevant to all of us.
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because, having seen Mike and Scott talk a number of times, I'm absolutely convinced they're the real deal. So, you just sort of think, oh, wow, how could someone like that have imposter syndrome? But yeah, it's very pernicious, right? It's everywhere. Yeah,
and it's and they're really interesting. Scott Farquhar particularly. So these guys, founders of Atlassian, I think they're worth about $18 billion each. They founded it, out of the garage type thing. Story about 20 years ago now, I suppose. Australian company. Interesting enough, Scott went to a workshop on part of what I coach on how to build company values, and that was in 2007 when they had 50 staff, and they credit the values they put together at that workshop as being the basis of where they are now.
Oh wow, that's amazing, Jonathan.
It's really, and so if you search Atlassian core values, you can see them out. It hasn't changed since 2007, and there's a fabulous video of this staff talking about core values. So,
lots of extra reading and watching for me there.
Exactly right. Okay, last question. Any last piece of advice or parting words to an entrepreneur or aspiring entrepreneur?
Yeah, look, I think for most entrepreneurs at some point, they're probably going to have to tackle the subject of raising capital. And if I was offering any advice, I would say either raise as much as you possibly can, or basically don't raise at all and think of other ways that you might get through. I think being caught in the middle is a really dangerous place to be. Either don't sort of just necessarily set a number that you think is reasonable. Go for as much as you possibly can if you're raising, or look at the other alternatives to raising in the markets. Alongside that, obviously, goes with talking to as many people as you can before you start a fundraising process. It is amazing how many people get partway through a process and then realize that they've actually missed some key information or they've misunderstood something about the process. And I think a lot of that could be alleviated by talking really much more broadly. There are so many people out there who are willing to help these days. There's a lot of, obviously, venture capital companies. There's a lot of coaches like yourself. There's accountants and lawyers. But, I actually think other founders and entrepreneurs are some of the best people to talk to because they've got the war stories. Quite often, it's done, over a beer or a glass of red wine with a cone of silence, and, some real home truths can be shared. So I think it's just not something that you need to go it alone with.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, it's fascinating. So a number of my clients, we go down this route about talking about raising, and we're backwards and forwards multiple times. And, one of the questions I always ask is, are you prepared to, really to have other people dictating your future direction by taking on investors, and is it worthwhile?
Yeah, it's really important to understand what the consequences are. It's not just about this capital goes into your bank account. So I think it's really important to understand just what you said, and also that whatever you raise or you don't raise, I've never seen anyway, anything that proves any causation or causal link between amount raised and the actual worthiness or success of a business. There are plenty of successful businesses worth a lot of money that didn't raise anything, or very little, or maybe they raised much later on, when they had really significant growth already. I think there's a lot of ego attached to it, and that can feel very destructive as a founder who doesn't feel they're on the right side of the funding cycle, or who doesn't feel confident pitching to investors. So I just think, just not to get too caught up in that ego piece. It's really hard because all of us as entrepreneurs, we see, the successes in the newspaper or, in the startup news daily, blogs or whatever emails that come out summarizing it all. And, once again, it's probably a little bit attached to imposter syndrome. You sort of think, oh, that couldn't be me. Well, it absolutely can be. But, it really does pay to do your homework and really think about why you need the money in the first place.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think your point is a really good one. There are a lot of people out there who are willing to give their time.
Yeah.
The prior episode of this, episode 101, was with an expert chartered accountant called Kurt Rendell, who by chance has been I actually don't manage the recruitment of Emma, you or Kurt, etc., into to be interviewed. It's done by my team. And by chance, Kurt popped up, and he's been my tax advisor for over 20 years. So it was a bit of an amusing conversation, given that he did it. He thought, anyway. The point he made was, you want to talk to someone, a founder, CEO, coach. I'm happy to give 30 minutes to an hour complimentary. Frankly, it's part of my sales process. It's people like Kurt, one of the top tax people in Australia, will give you a complimentary call. You can bring people like us, and as you say, other founders, etc. And we're very happy to give our time. And take us up on the offer and come and suck our brains, because there's so much good knowledge out there.
I totally agree, and I just think quite often people are reluctant for some reason, whether they think they're bothering other people, or they, don't think they're worthy of the time, or I don't know, but
people love helping.
Most people want to give back a little bit, right?
Exactly right.
Somewhere along the line. So.
I'll tell you what, if you want to go and have a look, find some people to talk to, go into this podcast. There's 102 founders like you who are out there, and I guarantee you every one of them will take a call.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, in and of itself, it's a club, right? It's its own club, but it's a very open membership. So, and there's
it's around episode 40 to 60. I'm not trying to pigeonhole women into women holes, but between episode 40 and 60, I specifically went out looking to interview women entrepreneurs, because all I had was men, and I was feeling I just felt like we were unbalanced, and so I specifically went looking for female entrepreneurs, and there are some amazing women that I interviewed there, like you, Emma. So. Reach out to some of these people, or follow them, have a look at what they're doing, because you can learn, and listen to the podcast. It's amazing what you'll learn just from listening to this podcast.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Emma, thank you.
Thank you.
As usual, we go in different directions from where.
I know. It's been really pleasurable, though.
Yeah, no, it's one of the funnest things that I do in my business, and I'm going to keep doing it because I enjoy it enormously, and I'm learning so much.
Yeah, well, please do. We all benefit as a result. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jonathan.
If you are hearing this message, you've listened to the entire episode. And for that, we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We hope you enjoyed this new episode. And if you did, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you watch/listen. It helps this channel more than you know, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the learning gets. Please share this episode with others who may be interested in entrepreneur stories of scaling up. If you want to be a guest on the podcast, please send an email to admin@scaleupgrowth.co. Put "Be a guest" in the subject line and tell me a little about yourself. If you want to gauge where your business growth potential is and identify where the biggest opportunities in your business lie, or where the key needs that you need to concentrate on right now are, take our assessment where you will receive personalized advice for improvement. It's quick and free. Go to scaleupgrowth.scoreapp.com. If you would like to work with me one-to-one, I love coaching and get the best outcomes that way. Send me an email at jonathan@scaleupgrowth.co and put one-to-one in the heading. Tell me a bit about your business and let's see how we can apply a great strategy for your business. So that's it for this week. Tune in next time for more great learnings from a scaling entrepreneur.